Story number 1, Final Walkthrough. I pulled into the gravel drive at Birchwood a little before 3 in the afternoon. The fog was already settling into the valley, that thick late autumn kind that makes everything look softer than it is. Daniel Reeves's sedan was still parked next to the porch, 2 hours past checkout. I sat there for a moment with the engine running, looking at the cabin. All the curtains were drawn. That was unusual, but not alarming. Some guests close everything up before they leave, like they're putting the place to bed. I checked my phone again. 3 missed calls to his number since noon. No response to the text I'd sent at 11 reminding him about checkout time. He was probably just sleeping in. It happens more than you'd think. People come up here to hike all weekend, wear themselves out, then sleep through their alarms on the last day. I've had to wake up plenty of guests over the years. It's awkward but not complicated. I got out and walked up to the porch. The air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke from someone's chimney down the mountain. I knocked firmly on the door. "Mr. Reeves, it's Sarah from Blue Ridge Property Management. Just checking in about checkout time." Nothing. I knocked again, louder this time. Waited. The fog was thickening. I could barely see my truck anymore. I tried to look through the window next to the door, but the curtains were pulled tight. No gaps. I walked around to the side of the cabin, boots crunching on wet gravel, and checked the other windows, all covered. The kitchen window in back, the bedroom windows on the side, everything sealed up. That's when I started feeling it. Not panic. Just a small cold spot in my chest. The kind you get when something is slightly wrong, but you can't name it yet. I walked back around to the front, and that's when I noticed the security camera above the door. We installed them at all the cabins 2 years ago after a break-in. This one had been moved. It was pointing down at the porch boards instead of out toward the driveway, and there was black tape over the lens. I stopped walking. He had done that. Or someone had. I pulled out my phone and called him again. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. "Mr. Reeves, this is Sarah again. I'm here at the cabin and I need you to respond, please. If you're ill or need assistance, I can call for help, but I need to hear from you." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I have a master key for every property we manage. It's on a ring with 23 others, color-coded by location. Birchwood is green." I found it and walked back to the door. The key slid in smoothly. I turned it and heard the deadbolt click open. I pushed the door. It moved about an inch and stopped hard. I pushed again. Something was blocking it from inside. Not furniture. It felt more solid than that. Deliberate. And then I heard it. A metallic, scraping sound. Slow and deliberate. Like another lock sliding into place somewhere deeper inside the cabin. I let go of the door and stepped back. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest. Not racing yet, just beating in a way that made me aware of it. I walked back to my truck, got in, locked the doors. My hands were steady enough to dial his number 1 more time. It rang, went to voicemail. "Daniel, I don't know what's going on, but you need to open the door and talk to me. I'm required to enter the property after checkout time. If you don't respond in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to have to call the authorities." I set the phone on the passenger seat and looked at the cabin. The living room curtain moved, not like wind, like someone pulling it aside. He was standing in the window. I could see his shape in the dim interior light. He was holding something up to his face. It took me a second to understand what I was looking at. Binoculars. He was watching me through binoculars from maybe 30 feet away. I started the truck. My hands weren't steady anymore. I put it in reverse and backed out onto the access road too fast, gravel spraying. I didn't look at the cabin again. I just drove. The sheriff's station is 9 miles down the mountain in town. The fog got worse as I descended. I had to slow down on the switchbacks. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I kept checking the rearview mirror, but there was nothing behind me except fog. Deputy Chen was at the front desk when I walked in. I must have looked wrong because he stood up immediately. "I need help with a situation," I said. My voice sounded thin. "I have a guest who won't leave a rental property. He's barricaded himself inside, and he's been watching me. I gave him the address, showed him the rental agreement on my phone, gave him my master keyring, explained about the checkout time, the blocked door, the camera, the locks, the binoculars. Chen didn't ask if I was sure, he just radioed for another unit and told me to follow him up. We drove back in 2 vehicles. He told me to wait at the bottom of the access road while he went up. I sat in my truck with the engine running and the doors locked. The fog was so thick now I couldn't see 20 feet. I waited. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Then Chen's voice came over the radio, but he wasn't talking to me. He was calling for backup. 2 more sheriff's vehicles arrived. They went up the access road and disappeared into the fog. I waited another 30 minutes. Finally, Chen came walking down out of the fog. He stopped at my window and I rolled it down. "We need you to come up and look at something," he said. His face was very neutral. That professional neutral that law enforcement uses when they don't want you to panic before you need to. They had Daniel in the back of one of the vehicles when I got there. I didn't look at him. Chen led me inside the cabin. It was neat, clean. Nothing obviously wrong. The secondary deadbolt he'd installed was still on the inside of the door, screwed into fresh holes in the frame. Chen walked me to the kitchen. There was a spiral notebook on the table. The kind with a blue cover you can buy anywhere. He opened it. The first page had the date from 3 months ago, September 7th. Below that, Sarah arrives, Birchwood 10:15 in the morning. White truck, stays 40 minutes. Leaves north toward Maple Ridge property. I felt something drop inside my chest. Chen turned the pages. 3 months of entries. My schedule, which cabins I cleaned on which days, what time I usually arrived, what route I drove, which grocery store I stopped at in town, the coffee shop where I got lunch on Thursdays. He'd been watching me for 3 months. The last page had photos, printed on regular paper. They were from our property management website. Professional headshots we use for the staff page. My face, 4 copies of the same photo. Below them, written in blue ink, my home address. And below that, circled in red, after Birchwood. Chen was saying something about statements and evidence and protective orders, but I wasn't really hearing him. I was looking at that red circle, after Birchwood. I still manage properties in Blue Ridge, I still do the walkthroughs, but I don't go alone anymore, and I installed new locks on my house, the kind that take more than a master key to open. Sometimes, in the fog, I think about how many times he must have watched me walk up to a cabin, unlock a door, go inside alone. How many times I was exactly where he knew I would be. The deputies told me he never said a word. Not during the arrest, not during processing. He just watched them with that same steady look. I don't know what he was waiting for. I don't know when he planned to move from watching to something else. I just know that I was on a schedule, and he knew it better than I did. Story number 2. Gate malfunction. I finished the last walkthrough at 10 p.m., like always, checking the dock doors and making sure the compactor was locked. Summer in Phoenix meant the warehouse held heat like an oven even after sunset, and I was looking forward to getting home. I badged out at the vehicle exit gate, heard the reader beep, but the light flashed red. The rolling gate didn't move. My truck sat 15 feet ahead, boxed in by chain link and concrete bollards. I tried again, same red flash, same error tone. The gate system had been glitchy since the power surge that afternoon, the one that knocked out half the computers in the office for 20 minutes. I figured it was related. These things happened. I walked back to try the pedestrian door on the east side, but that reader gave me the same red error. The front gate did too. 3 separate readers, 3 separate locks, all refusing my badge. My truck was still running. I'd left it idling because I was only supposed to be 30 seconds, and now diesel exhaust was pooling in the humid air, thick and acrid. I could taste it in the back of my throat. I pulled out my phone and called the after-hours security line. It rang 6 times and kicked to voicemail. I left a message explaining the situation, then tried the main office number. Same result. I stood there in the parking lane between the warehouse and the fence, sweating through my shirt, telling myself it was just a system error. Someone would call back. The surge must have corrupted something in the access database. It happened. I just needed to wait. Then the overhead lights in the back half of the warehouse cut out. Not flickering, not dimming, just gone, section by section, like someone was throwing breakers. The loading area dropped into darkness, and the only light left was the fluorescent glow from the front offices and the amber security floods outside the fence. I heard something from the loading area, footsteps maybe. Hard to tell over the rumble of my engine, but it sounded like shoe soles on concrete, echoing in that specific way the warehouse did when it was empty. I told myself it was the building settling, old metal roof, temperature change, expansion and contraction. But I'd worked here 6 years and I'd never heard it sound like footsteps before. I walked toward the office to check the gate control panel. We had a manual override in the security closet. I should have thought of it sooner, but I'd been assuming this was temporary, that the system would reset itself or someone would call me back. Now I just wanted out. That's when I noticed the camera above the exit gate. It was tilted down, pointing at the asphalt instead of the gate. I'd walked past it a dozen times tonight and it had been fine. Security cameras didn't move themselves. Someone had repositioned it. The footsteps were louder now, closer. I couldn't pinpoint the direction because of the echoes, but they were definitely footsteps. Deliberate, not hurried. And then I heard something else, a metallic scraping, like a tool dragging across the floor or a chain being pulled. I turned away from the office and headed for the forklift bay. My heart was pounding now. That animal panic you get when your brain stops making excuses and just screams at you to move. I didn't look back toward the loading area. I didn't want to see if someone was there. The forklift bay was near the west corner, 6 lifts parked in a row. I had the master key on my ring. My hands were shaking enough that it took 2 tries to get it in the ignition, but the engine turned over and the headlights snapped on. I dropped it into gear and swung around toward the exit. The chain link fence was 8 feet high, but the section beside the main gate was just fence. No bollards, no concrete. I could see the access road through it, empty and dark. I revved the engine and drove straight at it. The first impact bent the fence outward, but didn't break it. The forklift bounced back and I almost stalled. I reversed, gave it more throttle, and hit it again. This time the posts ripped out of the ground and the whole section folded down. I backed the forklift up, killed the engine, and ran for my truck. I drove over the flattened fence and onto the access road, tires crunching over gravel and torn metal. I didn't stop until I reached the gas station 3 miles south on the highway, the one with the bright lights and the overnight clock. I parked under the canopy and called 911. The officer who responded took my statement in the gas station parking lot. Possible intruder, I told him. Someone tampered with the security system. He radioed it in and then asked if I could access the warehouse security footage remotely. I couldn't, but he said he'd follow me back and we could review it on site if I felt safe enough. I didn't, but I said yes anyway. We went back together, his patrol car behind my truck. The warehouse was still lit in front, still dark in back. He checked the building with another officer who'd arrived as backup. No one inside. No signs of forced entry on the ground level. But when he pulled up the security footage on his laptop in the office, he found something. He turned the screen toward me. 7:03 p.m. I was in the front section doing inventory, my back to the camera. On the screen, the roof maintenance hatch in the back corner opened. Someone dropped through onto the catwalk, then climbed down the ladder to the floor. The angle was bad and the lighting was worse, but I could see the jacket. Dark blue reflective stripe across the shoulders. I recognized it immediately. Marcus Webb. We'd terminated him 5 weeks ago for bypassing a safety lockout on one of the balers. He'd argued, said it was a judgment call, that the machine was fine, but the rules were the rules, and he'd been written up twice before. He didn't take it well. Didn't make threats exactly, but he'd said something about how people who think they run things don't actually understand how anything works. The officer asked if I knew him. I said yes. He asked if Marcus had access to the security system. I said he used to. He'd worked here for 3 years. He knew the layout, the cameras, the after-hours protocols. The officer made notes and said they'd follow up. He asked if I wanted an escort home. I said no, I just wanted to leave. I drove home and didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the timing. Marcus had been inside the warehouse for almost 3 hours while I finished my shift, watching me, waiting. And I hadn't known. The camera repositioned, the gates locked, the lights cut. He'd been in control the whole time, and I just kept walking my routes, checking my lists, assuming I was alone. They never found him. The police said he'd cleared out of his apartment 2 days before. No forwarding address, no credit card activity. His phone went to voicemail. I don't work late shifts anymore. I asked for days and they moved me. Someone else closes now. I don't know if Marcus ever came back. I don't know what he wanted. But sometimes I think about those 3 hours, walking around that warehouse in the light, and I wonder how many times he was standing just outside my field of vision, waiting to see what I'd do. Story number 3, platform extension. I boarded the last Red Line train at Fullerton at 11:58, the platform nearly empty except for a couple arguing near the stairs and a man asleep against a column. 8 hours in the library had left my eyes dry and my shoulders tight. I found a seat in the rear car, dropping my laptop bag beside me, and pulled out my phone to text my roommate that I'd be home soon. The train rocked through the familiar stations. I watched my reflection in the dark window, half listening to the automated announcements. Morse, Loyola, Jarvis. The car had emptied out by Granville, just me and the hum of the heater and the smell of wet coats. At Howard Street, the terminus, I glanced up from my phone. The last few passengers were shuffling toward the doors. An older woman with a rolling cart. 2 guys in restaurant uniforms. I should have stood then. I meant to. But I was in the middle of reading something, and I thought I had a few more seconds. The doors closed. I looked up, confused, my thumb still on the screen. The train lurched forward, not the gentle roll into the yard. A real lurch, like we were pulling out of a station. I stood, grabbing the pole, expecting us to stop within a few seconds. Conductors did a final sweep. He'd realize. We'd stop, the doors would open, and I'd walk back onto the platform feeling stupid. But we didn't stop. The train accelerated. I could feel it in my legs the way the floor pressed upward. We were moving faster than we should have been. I moved toward the front of the car, thinking I'd find the conductor, explain that I was still on board. The door between cars was heavy. I shoved it open and stepped through. The next car was empty, seats vacant, overhead lights steady and bright. I kept moving forward, steadying myself against the poles as the train swayed. Through the next door, another empty car. Then I saw him. 4 cars ahead, sitting near the middle, facing away from me. A man in a dark maintenance jacket, the kind with reflective stripes on the shoulders. He was motionless, completely still. I felt a flicker of relief. Someone else was on board. Maybe he worked for the CTA. Maybe he'd know what was happening. I started to call out, but something stopped me. The train plunged into darkness. Not the normal kind, the brief tunnels between stations. This was total. The windows showed nothing. No lights, no station platforms, no distant glow of the city. Just black. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, and the smell hit me. Burnt rubber, sharp and chemical, like tires grinding on concrete. It filled the car, thick enough to taste. I pressed my sleeve over my nose and mouth, my heart starting to kick harder. We were supposed to be in the yard by now. We were supposed to have stopped. I pulled out my phone, no signal. The time read 12:09. The lights steadied. I looked forward again. The man was standing. He hadn't turned around. His back was still to me, but he was on his feet now, facing the front of the train. I watched him through the windows between cars, my hand tight on the pole. He started walking. Not toward the front, toward me. One car closer. I told myself it was fine. He was just moving through the train. People did that. Maybe he'd seen me. Maybe he was coming to explain what was happening. But he moved in a strange way, stiff and deliberate, his head never turning. The lights flickered again, longer this time. When they came back on, he was in the next car, 2 cars away. The burnt smell was getting worse. My eyes were watering. The train was still accelerating, the wheels screaming on the rails, and I realized we weren't in the yard. We were in a tunnel, a real tunnel, deep and unlit, the kind used for maintenance or storage. I backed up, moving toward the rear of the train. My hands were shaking. I kept my eyes on him through the windows. He reached the door between cars and pushed through, 1 car away. I could see him more clearly now. The jacket was stained, streaked with something dark. His hands hung at his sides. His face was angled downward, but I couldn't see his features. The lights flickered again, a rhythmic strobing that made my stomach clench, and when they steadied, he was at the door. My door. I didn't think. I turned and ran to the back of the car, to the rear wall, and grabbed the emergency brake handle. It was red and heavy and marked with warnings. I pulled. Nothing happened. I pulled again, harder, throwing my weight into it. The handle gave with a metallic snap and the train screamed. The brakes engaged. A sound like tearing metal, and I was thrown forward into a seat. My bag hit the floor. The smell of burnt rubber became overwhelming. The train slowed. I looked back at the door. He was standing there, not moving. Just standing, his hand on the glass. The train stopped. I didn't wait. I ran to the side doors and slammed my hands against the emergency release. The door hissed and cracked open 6 inches, then a foot. Cold air poured in, damp and stinking of oil. I shoved my bag through and squeezed after it, stumbling onto concrete. A service platform, narrow and dim, lit by a single caged bulb 20 feet away. The walls were tile, old and stained, marked with faded yellow paint. No signs, no maps. I ran toward the light and found a metal ladder bolted to the wall. I climbed. My hands slipped on the rungs. My laptop bag kept swinging into my ribs. I didn't look back. I climbed until I reached a hatch, rusted and heavy, and shoved it open. Cold air, rain, the sound of waves. I was near Jarvis Beach, the street empty and slick. I ran toward Sheridan Road, my breath tearing in my throat, and saw headlights. A patrol car moving slow. I stepped into the street waving my arms. The officer rolled down his window. I was shaking so hard I could barely speak. I told him I'd been trapped on a train, that it kept going past Howard, that there was a man, that I'd pulled the emergency brake and climbed out near the beach. He called it in. Another car arrived. Then a supervisor from the CTA, a woman in a yellow vest with a tablet in her hands. She pulled up the dispatch logs, her face lit by the screen. Last Red Line train reached Howard Terminus at 12:04, she said. Went out of service at 12:11. It's been parked in the yard since then. I stared at her. No, I was on it. It kept going. She turned the screen toward me, rows of data, times and train numbers. No southbound movement after 12:11. No maintenance runs scheduled tonight. There was a man, I said, in a maintenance jacket. She scrolled through another screen. No one matching that description on duty tonight. The officer drove me home. I sat in the back seat, staring at my hands. My roommate met me at the door, her face pale. I told her I was fine. I wasn't fine. I still take the red line. I have to. But I don't sit in the rear car anymore, and I get off at Howard. Every time. Even if I'm in the middle of something, even if I think I have a few more seconds, I get off.